how does it work with our imagination? In our imagination, we see pictures, we find ourselves in worlds, we hear words and so forth. What does that refer to? And I want you to notice that the imagination is always stirred up by feelings. It is always emotions that stir up in us imaginings of various kinds. And I want to suggest to you an analogy, which is that physical energy is to sensation as emotional energy is to imagination. So I had to feel that for a minute. There's physical energy out there, and we apprehend it as sensation. And there's emotional energy, this whole ocean of emotional energy in which we live. And when we apprehend that, we apprehend it as imagination. Right? So that our subtle senses pick up emotional energy, whereas our physical senses pick up physical energy. The vital world, the transphysical world closest to the physical, if we assume this threefold distinction, that world is a world in which the energy is emotion. Right? So it's I want to just play with this idea, right? There's something about physical energy that's very simple. And there's something about emotional energy that's somehow more complex. I see red, but I feel lust, right? And lust, there's some connection there between red and lust, right? But lust is so much more complex than red. Right? And so this is the suggestion I want to make, is that they're not only the different grades of matter, but in the same sense, there are different grades of energy. There is physical energy, emotional energy, and then something else which I'm calling meaning energy. And what I'm suggesting is that in our minds, and now I'm using mind in this new sense, not the same sense I used it yesterday, but that in the mental strata of our being, or is it stratum of our being, in the mental level of our being, we apprehend meaning and represent it to ourselves in terms of thought. Right? So there's a layer of meaning energy which we apprehend in the form of thoughts, a layer of emotional energy which we apprehend in the form of imagination, and a layer of physical energy which we apprehend in the form of sensation. You kind of feel that analogy? Right? And then there's a certain sense we can also I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, that we know what it's like to work in physical matter. Any artist knows that, but anybody who cooks knows that. Anybody who cleans the house knows that. It's what it means to work with physical matter. And physical matter is very inert, and physical matter is completely resistant to our intentions. Almost always so, except in the case of psychokinesis. But in the general run of the everyday run of events, if I want to lift this cup up, I have to use my hands. I have to engage physical energy to lift the cup. But in the realm of imagination, when I'm working with imagination, the matter of the imagination, the stuff, as it were, that I see or experience in my dreamlike experiences and my out-of-body experiences is much more responsive to my intentions. It's a different kind of stuff. And as we said yesterday, it's a kind of stuff which is more mental, which is more conscious in its operation, and which is more sensitive, more responsive, and more adaptive. And then again, there's the stuff of meaning, which is what I work with in thought. And anybody who really works with thoughts know that they're not entirely amenable to will, that they're much more amenable to will. I can think what I want to think more easily than I can imagine what I want to imagine. But still, thought has its own independence, its own geography, its own logic that we can't really overcome with our will. Right? So these are these different levels of our existence, and I'm suggesting that each one of them is also a world, so that even at this moment, as we are here together, we are living in the mental world. I am communicating meaning to you on the mental level. You are feeling the meaning which I am embodying and broadcasting. and then you are translating the meaning into your thoughts. And you are feeling my emotions, which translate in some way into your image of me, or your picture of me, or your imagination of me, what in psychology we might call your projections, although here we're calling them not projections, but perceptions in some way. And then there's my physical embodiment, which you are hearing in my voice as the vibrations travel across the intervening air, and with your eyes as the photons are bouncing off of me and entering your eyes. So we're living at all these different levels at once, in these three different worlds. So the implication here, what is the implication here? Is that our thoughts and our imaginations are not just inner, private analyses of and responses to sensations, but that our inner imagination and our inner thoughts are also perceptions of other beings, beings that are both embodied and disembodied, and they're perceptual, and they need to be taken as such. This involves a significant reinterpretation of experience in a very radical way. So, for example, we assume that our feelings are private. They're not private. Anybody who's either been in psychotherapy or done psychotherapy knows this for a fact, right? That we feel each other's feelings and we think each other's thoughts, so that the privacy we have is much, much less than what we thought. And the inner unprocessed messes that we have in our psyches, they are actually polluting the environment. There's actually a level of psychic pollution. Arnold Mindell talks about this. He says the pollution we need to clean up is the psychic pollution, because we affect each other. Any unresolved work that we haven't done affects the people around us, whether we speak to them or not. Right? So this is a very different conception of reality, and it takes some time to process it and get used to it. So then I want to talk about, in terms of this understanding of these three levels, I want to talk about the anatomy of a human being. This is a diagram of a human being. So the idea here, let's see what I want to do here. Before I started from the bottom up, I'm going to start from the top down this time. This circle represents our self. And by our self, I'm not talking with a capital S. I'm talking with a small s. This self is our basic dominant personality, the one that we usually meet the world with, the one that we usually call the ego. And let's say it's a personality, it's a personally ordered sequence of actual occasions. This moment and this moment as I speak, expressing my personality. But at the same time, we know this is not all of who we are. We also have sub-personalities of various kinds. Now, for example, sometimes we'll lose our temper, and then a different part of us will come out, and we'll say, oh, that wasn't me, I didn't mean it, right? And we all know what that's like. And also, anyone who's really studied this can watch people shifting into and out of different personalities as their mood changes. Right? When someone's in a bad mood, they act one way. When they're in a good mood, they act another way. And each one of these sort of systems of behavior constitutes a sub-personality. And in psychotherapy, one of the things we do is we disentangle the sub-personalities, give them names, help them to communicate with each other, and so forth. And some of these sub-personalities are well integrated, we're comfortable with them, and some of them we don't like, and they form our shadows, the parts of us we don't like, that we repress. And so our everyday self is a whole collection of sub-personalities, and these sub-personalities are each personalities in the sense that each one of them is also a sequence of actual occasions organized with personal order. They're actual real entities in the mental level of the transphysical world. This is the physical level, the vital level, and the mental level. We're assuming we can make this threefold division just for the sake of discussion. And in the mental level, there are these subpersonalities, and they have their own lives. Right? This becomes really clear in the case of multiple personality disorder, in which some of these subpersonalities actually take over. That the self becomes just one among the subpersonalities. It loses its dominant place. And all these different subpersonalities can come in and take over and have completely different memory streams. So they don't remember each other. Or this one might remember this one, but not this one. And this one might remember all three of these, right? So multiple personality is very intricate and complex, but it shows us that in fact these personalities are separable, and that I'm suggesting they have the ontological status of enduring societies of actual occasions in the mental world. Now, here's an interesting question. I'm speaking to you now in this nice, reasonable tone of voice, but then I might lose my temper and suddenly shout. So let's say another subpersonality came in and took over. You know what that means, right? You can feel that. We've all had that experience. What does it take over? What is the central entity that these subpersonalities can fight over? And I want to suggest that that central entity is what the Buddhists call the sixth sense. It's the manas, the mind. And I want to suggest that there is a personally ordered society of actual occasions which functions as the central organizing intelligence for the body. And that it receives reports from all the sense consciousness, right? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body. And from the organs, each one of which has its own intelligence, which is also mental because we think with our heart and we think with our belly, right? And there are also some miscellaneous consciousnesses that we all have. So for example, each one of us has an idiot savant consciousness which can instantaneously compute trajectories. So if somebody throws a ball at us, we can catch it. That's a very complex cognitive function that we do instantaneously and unconsciously. And in fact, there are a number of those. We don't have to go into all that. But there are these different intelligence that we have. And so the sixth sense receives reports from a whole bunch of other semi-autonomous consciousnesses, and it brings it together, and it forms a sort of control panel for the body. And the various subpersonalities then are competing over who's going to have a privileged relationship with this sixth consciousness.